On the evening of May 25th, 1991, 5-year-old Timmy Wiltsey was reported missing at a carnival in Sayreville, New Jersey. It was Memorial Day weekend. Timmy had arrived with his mother, Michelle Lodzinski. He was wearing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle sneakers, a red tank top, and shorts. According to Michelle, she had been getting him a soda from a food stand when he disappeared. When she turned around to give him the drink, Timmy was gone. At around 7 p.m., Michelle's 15-year-old niece, Jennifer Dilcher, and a friend arrived at the carnival. They found Michelle standing alone. Dilcher asked where Timmy was, and Michelle told her she did not know and could not find him. Alarmed, Dilcher ran to alert local authorities. Sayreville Police Officer Kevin Skolnick responded to the call. At first, he believed Timmy might have simply wandered off and would be located quickly. Officers conducted an initial 20-minute search of the carnival grounds, expecting to find the child nearby. However, when there was still no sign of Timmy, concerns grew. Skolnick contacted his lieutenant, and reinforcements were called in. Michelle then used a carnival loudspeaker to call out to her son. As the search intensified, the carnival's music was shut off, and officers arrived in greater numbers. A full-scale investigation began. Authorities began to treat the disappearance as more than just a lost child. This marked the beginning of a case that would span decades, raise disturbing questions, and leave a community searching for answers. In the immediate aftermath of Timmy Wiltsey's disappearance, the response from law enforcement and the local community was swift and intense. Police officers and volunteers remained at the carnival into the early morning hours, combing through every inch of the grounds and surrounding area. Search teams spread into nearby fields and wooded sections, hoping to find any clue that might lead to the missing child. That same night, Michelle Lodzinski made a frantic call to her sister, Linda Heisey, telling her that Timmy was gone. According to Heisey, Michelle was hysterical and inconsolable on the phone. By dawn, the search effort expanded dramatically. Over 300 volunteers arrived at Kennedy Park, the 10-acre site where the carnival had been held. A state police helicopter hovered overhead, and dive teams scoured 2 nearby ponds, but there was still no trace of the 5-year-old. Detective Keith Hackett of the New Jersey State Police began to suspect that something was seriously wrong. He later noted that Timmy was not the type of child who would simply wander off or fall into water unnoticed. Despite the large-scale search and overwhelming community support, there were no leads, no witnesses, and no physical evidence. The transient nature of the carnival complicated the investigation. Equipment and booths had already begun moving on, potentially taking critical evidence with them. Although the public viewed Michelle as a grieving mother, law enforcement quietly began to question her account. Subtle inconsistencies were noted, and suspicion quietly began to grow behind the scenes. Nearly 5 months after Timmy Wiltsey's disappearance, a major development occurred. In the fall of 1991, a high school teacher exploring the Edison marshlands, just across the river from where the carnival had taken place, came across a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle sneaker lying on the ground. The shoe matched the same size and style number as the pair Timmy had been wearing the night he vanished. Although DNA testing could not conclusively confirm it belonged to Timmy, investigators treated the find as a potential turning point. An initial search of the marshlands failed to uncover any additional evidence. Still, authorities were not ready to give up. On April 23, 1992, the FBI organized a second, more extensive search of the area. This time, searchers discovered a second sneaker that matched the first. While most of the search team remained on one side of the road, Detective Keith Hackett chose to cross to the other side and continued searching alone. Frustrated, Hackett said a quiet prayer, asking for a sign. Moments later, in a drainage area of the creek, he spotted what looked like a human skull. For Hackett, it was an emotional moment, one he believed was more than coincidence. Dental analysis would later confirm the remains were indeed Timmy Wiltsey's. In addition to the skull, authorities recovered other small bones, a pillow, and a distinctive blue and white blanket. Due to the advanced state of decomposition, a medical examiner could not determine the cause of death. Timmy's aunt, Linda Heisey, described Michelle as devastated by the news. But for investigators, the discovery only deepened their doubts about Michelle's account. The presence of household items, especially the blanket, raised unsettling questions and intensified their focus on Timmy's mother. As the investigation into Timmy Wiltsey's disappearance progressed, investigators became increasingly concerned with the inconsistencies in Michelle Lodzinski's story. On the night Timmy was reported missing, Michelle told police that her son vanished while she was getting him a drink. She claimed that when she turned around, he was gone. This initial version of events was straightforward but would soon change dramatically. In a later account, Michelle introduced a new character, a woman named Ellen, who she described as an exotic dancer and welfare recipient. According to Michelle, Ellen had offered to help Timmy onto a carnival ride while Michelle got the soda. When she returned, both Ellen and Timmy were gone. Investigators created a composite sketch and searched welfare records, but no one matching Ellen's description was ever identified. Later still, Michelle gave yet another version of events. In an interview with Detective Sergeant Jerry Lewis, she claimed that two men had approached her and threatened her with knives, warning her to stay quiet. She described one of the men placing his arm around her and making a veiled threat about Timmy's appearance. Michelle also allegedly failed 2 polygraph tests, although the results were inadmissible in court. Despite growing doubts about her credibility, authorities still had no physical evidence tying her to Timmy's death. With no concrete proof, they could not arrest her. Still, investigators kept her under close watch, carefully documenting every variation in her story and waiting for the moment when the pieces might finally come together. Nearly 3 years after Timmy Wiltsey's disappearance, the case took a dramatic and unexpected turn. In a strange twist, Michelle Lodzinski herself vanished. Her car was found abandoned, engine still running, with her purse and glasses left behind inside the vehicle. Most notably, a business card was discovered at the scene, appearing to be from an FBI agent. Written on the card were 2 ominous notes: "See you soon," and "It's not over." The strange discovery sent shockwaves through her family. Jennifer Dilcher, Michelle's niece, feared the worst. She believed that the same people who had taken Timmy had returned for Michelle. The fear and trauma of losing her cousin seemed to resurface instantly. But the next day, Michelle contacted police. She claimed she had been kidnapped at gunpoint by 2 men posing as FBI agents, covered with blanket, and transported over 600 miles to Detroit before being released. Her story, however, began to quickly unravel. Authorities found that she had purchased a bus ticket from Newark to Detroit, and she made the phone call from a payphone outside a bus station. The FBI business card left at the scene turned out to be a fake, and the name on it did not match any active agents. Investigators concluded that Michelle had staged a fake kidnapping to avoid testifying before a grand jury, possibly connected to her boyfriend, a Union County police officer who had used apartment resources to investigate a vehicle she believed was following her. Michelle was charged and later convicted of making false statements to the FBI and fraudulent use of a government seal. She received 6 months of house arrest. While her legal issues mounted, there was still no official resolution in her son's death, and the case remained unsolved. As the years went by with no resolution, Michelle Lodzinski quietly moved forward with her life. She got married, had 2 more children, and eventually relocated from Minnesota to Florida after her marriage ended. For 2 decades, the death of Timmy Wiltsey remained a haunting but unsolved case. Then, in 2011, a new prosecutor took interest in revisiting the cold case. On June 30th, 2011, authorities contacted Jennifer Dilcher, Michelle's niece. Investigators presented her with a blue and white blanket that had been found near Timmy's remains back in 1992. The moment she saw it, Jennifer recognized it as something that had come from Michelle's home. She was visibly shaken and emotionally overwhelmed by the discovery. 2 additional babysitters who had spent time in the Lodzinski household also identified the blanket. Based on this, investigators developed a new theory. Timmy had likely never made it to the carnival. Instead, they believed he had been killed at home and his body was later dumped in the Edison marshlands. Though no physical evidence directly tied Michelle to crime, and the cause of death remained undetermined, prosecutors moved forward with first-degree murder charges. Michelle was arrested and brought to trial. The prosecution argued she had fabricated the carnival story to cover up the crime. In response, The defense claimed Michelle was a devoted mother, and the case was built on circumstantial evidence and character attacks. A witness even testified to seeing Timmy at the carnival. Despite the defense's efforts, the jury returned a guilty verdict, and Michelle was sentenced to 30 years in prison. The conviction of Michelle Lodzinski for the murder of her 5-year-old son, Timmy Wiltsey, in 2016 seemed like the long-awaited resolution to a decades-old mystery. After a trial based on circumstantial evidence, particularly the blue and white blanket found near Timmy's remains, a jury found Michelle guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to 30 years in prison with no possibility of parole. However, that verdict would not stand. In December 2021, the New Jersey Supreme Court issued a landmark decision that overturned Michelle's conviction. The justices ruled that the state had failed to meet the legal standard of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The prosecution had presented no physical evidence, no eyewitnesses, and the cause of Timmy's death remained undetermined. The central piece of evidence, the blanket, was circumstantial and not enough to justify a conviction for murder. The court's decision not only vacated her conviction, but also acquitted Michelle Lodzinski, meaning she was formally cleared of the charges. Due to double jeopardy protections, she cannot be retried for Timmy's death under any circumstances. After more than 30 years of investigation, shifting accounts, public scrutiny, and legal battles, the case officially came to a close, but without a clear resolution. Many continue to question Michelle's varying stories, but legally, she remains not guilty. Timmy Wiltsey's death is now a closed case under the law. Yet for the public, it remains an unresolved tragedy, leaving behind more questions and answers and a lasting sense of uncertainty. On the morning of February 20th, 2025, the Carroll County Sheriff's Office received a distressing 911 call from 17-year-old Sarah Grace Patrick. She reported that her 5-year-old sister had discovered their mother and stepfather, Kristen and James Brock, shot to death in their beds. The location was a modest home in Tyus, Georgia, a quiet rural town situated just outside of Carrollton. Law enforcement officers responded immediately, arriving at the residence to find both victims deceased, each suffering from fatal gunshot wounds. The initial assessment of the scene showed no visible signs of forced entry, which quickly raised suspicions. However, one door was found left ajar, prompting questions about how the killer may have entered or exited the home. The brutal nature of the killings, paired with the unsettling detail of a child discovering the bodies, sent shockwaves through the close-knit Tyus community. This was not a place accustomed to violent crime. Residents, many of whom knew the Brocks personally, were left in disbelief. News of the double homicide traveled fast, and the community quickly became gripped by confusion and grief. Given the seriousness and complexity of the case, the Carroll County Sheriff's Office called for assistance. Investigators from the FBI, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation Crime Lab, and private forensic laboratories joined the effort to process the crime scene and analyze the evidence. The involvement of these agencies underscored the gravity of the investigation. With lack of forced entry and the victims found in their beds, early theories remained limited. The circumstances surrounding the deaths were deeply troubling, and with no immediate answers, law enforcement faced a challenging case from the very beginning. The search for clarity had only just begun. Kristen Brock, 41, and her husband James Brock, 45, were more than just names in a police report. They were familiar faces in Tyus, Georgia. Respected and well-liked, the couple was known for their steady presence in the local church and their quiet, unassuming lifestyle. By all accounts, they were the kind of people who kept to themselves but were always willing to lend a helping hand. Their sudden and violent deaths left a void not just within their family, but throughout the small community they called home. Kristen's father, Dennis Nolan, spoke publicly following the tragedy. In an interview with 11 Alive, he voiced the confusion that many were feeling. He explained that the couple had no known enemies and led lives that gave no indication of danger. His heartbreak was evident as he tried to make sense of the loss. If there was something they wanted in the house, he said, referring to a potential intruder, they could have taken it, and they probably would not have woken up, but for some reason, they wanted them dead, and I want to know why. This section of the story highlights the human impact of the crime. It focuses on the lives that were taken, the family members left behind, and the grief that continues in the absence of answers. There were no signs of conflict, no warnings, no motive, just two people who were deeply loved, taken without explanation. The central question remained painfully clear. Why would anyone want this couple dead? Following the 911 call on February 20th, 2025, law enforcement officers from the Carroll County Sheriff's Office launched an immediate investigation into the deaths of Kristen and James Brock. The crime scene, located inside the couple's home in Tyus, presented a disturbing contradiction. Despite the brutal nature of the killings, there were no signs of forced entry. The home showed no evidence of a struggle or break-in. However, one door was found ajar, suggesting a possible exit route and raising further questions about how the perpetrator may have entered or left without detection. With no immediate suspects and an unclear motive, the investigation escalated rapidly. Recognizing the need for specialized support, the Sheriff's Office enlisted assistance from multiple agencies, including the FBI, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation Crime Lab, and private forensic laboratories. Their goal was to conduct a comprehensive forensic review of the scene, collecting physical evidence that could offer clues. Authorities did not release specifics about the findings, maintaining a level of confidentiality to protect the integrity of the case. In homicide investigations involving families, it is standard for law enforcement to begin by evaluating close relationships. This includes looking into family dynamics, any past conflicts or signs of domestic unrest. However, no public details initially emerged suggesting turmoil within the Brock household. As a result, the investigation faced a difficult beginning, an apparent double homicide without a clear suspect, no visible break-in, and no known reason for the attack. The scene posed more questions than answers, leaving investigators with a complex and unsettling puzzle. On July 8, 2025, nearly 5 months after the brutal murders of Kristen and James Brock, the Carroll County Sheriff's Office made a startling announcement. During a press conference, officials revealed that 17-year-old Sarah Grace Patrick, the teen who had originally called 911 to report the crime, was now the primary suspect. She had been formally charged with 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of aggravated assault in connection with the deaths of her mother and stepfather. The announcement stunned the Tyus community and gained widespread media attention. Sarah had no prior criminal history and had initially been seen as a witness, possibly even a secondary victim, due to her presence in the home and the traumatic nature of the event. Her calm and composed 911 call had portrayed her as a protective older sister, responding to a horrific situation. However, spokesperson Ashley Hulsey of the Carroll County Sheriff's Office stated that investigators had gathered mountains of evidence implicating Sarah in the crime. While the nature of the evidence was not disclosed, Hulsey emphasized the strength of the case. At the same time, she cautioned that the investigation was still active and that the involvement of additional individuals had not been ruled out. What made the case even more confounding was the absence of an established motive. "We do not know what goes through the mind of a child who wants to harm their parents," Hulsey said, acknowledging the emotional weight of the situation. According to officials, once Sarah was notified of the warrant, she voluntarily turned herself into authorities, accompanied by her father. This unexpected turn dramatically shifted the case's direction, transforming Sarah from grieving daughter to the alleged perpetrator of crime that continued to baffle both investigators and the public. Even with formal charges filed and a suspect in custody, one of the most critical elements of the case remains disturbingly unclear: the motive. Why would Sarah Grace Patrick, a 17-year-old with no known history of violence, allegedly take the lives of her mother and stepfather? That question continues to haunt investigators, the community, and surviving family members. During the July 8 press conference, Carroll County Sheriff's Office spokesperson Ashley Hulsey addressed the public's confusion. While she affirmed that mountains of evidence led to Sarah's arrest, she also admitted that no clear motive had been established. "We do not know what goes through the mind of a child who wants to harm their parents," Hulsey stated, highlighting the emotional and psychological weight of the investigation. Authorities have not released any details suggesting a history of abuse, conflict, or external pressure that might explain Sarah's alleged actions. The investigation also remains active, with officials stating that the involvement of other individuals has not been ruled out. No additional suspects have been named, and no new charges have been filed. Investigators have asked anyone with further information come forward, underscoring that key questions remain unanswered. This lingering uncertainty has left the Tyus community unsettled. In a town unaccustomed to violent crime, the case has disrupted the sense of safety and trust that once defined daily life. For the surviving family members, the pain is compounded by the lack of answers. As the legal process moves forward, many hope that the trial will shed light on what truly happened. The documentary closes by acknowledging that while Sarah Grace Patrick awaits trial, the full truth about motive, potential accomplices, and events leading up to killings may not be fully understood for a long time, if ever.